Hello, everyone. My name is Ellis, and today I want to welcome you to my presentation related to my dissertation on the comfort of the screen, emotional and social effects of watching content while eating. So, basically, what that means is does watching things or consuming digital content while eating affect our mental well-being in any kind of way? Here is the contents of the presentation that you're going to see today. So we're going to go quickly. We're going to start with the abstract, but I'm not going to go over that in detail because I'm going to stop so that you can read it if you want to. Please do. And then I'm going to quickly go over the objectives of this presentation, kind of what I hope you to get out of it, and understanding and that kind of thing. And then I'm going to quickly give you some background on why I believed that this research topic was important. And then I'm going to explain to you kind of the research methodology, the research practices that we used, and that kind of thing. And then after that, we're going to go on to the results. I'm going to explain the results. I'm going to show you some numbers so that you can see exactly what I mean when I say what I say. And then we're going to go over the discussion, basically what the results that we found mean or don't mean for the field of mental well-being and the importance of what we found, where people might be able to take the research in the future, that kind of thing. And then I'm going to just do a quick conclusion, and then you'll find at the very end of the presentation some references to some information and the questionnaires that you have found in this study. So feel free again to look those in time. So here's the abstract. I'm not gonna go over it for too long, but I'm gonna pause it just long enough for you to be able to read it. Okay, hopefully that was enough time for you to quickly scan the abstract page. If not, then please take some more time, but I'm going to go ahead. So the objectives of this presentation are to introduce the background of why I thought, again, this study was important to do, some background research into eating, mental well-being, loneliness, social connection, and digital engagement. And then also, again, as I explained before, give you the methodology, so basically the methods that we used to conduct this study. And then also, after that, give you the results of the findings, any significant findings that we found, any insignificant ones we found, and what that means for the future. So let's go into the background. So, as I'm pretty sure we're all aware, humans are usually very social creatures, which means we like to be in groups for both social connection and well-being, and historically also safety. Now loneliness, basically not being a part of a group, if that's what you want to call it, or being separate from a group, or that around those areas, depends how you want to define it into that specific person, is associated with higher levels of loneliness. typically. So you're probably then wondering, okay, so how does that feed into my research area? And in order to answer that question, I first need to explain to you why the increase of the use of digital media, TV, movies, video games has been so impactful. So first, there have been mixed results on what social media and digital engagement and that kind of thing can do to your mental health. Some say it's really helpful, some say it's not helpful at all. It just depends on who you're asking. For some people, it can help to improve their mental well-being and loneliness levels, especially if they find groups online that they feel a part of, and of their hobbies or things they like to talk about, or things that interest them in any kind of way. But also, if the online and digital media can be quite isolating in the sense that people are expected to almost fit into a certain mold of what certain things should be, like what you should look like, what you should do on a daily basis, whatever it is that we're discussing. And if you don't fit into that, the internet can be a very, very disheartening place sometimes. So with that being said, I felt as though not only was the internet important to discuss, but also other kinds of digital media. Again, that could be watching TV, playing video games, talking on the phone, video calling, that kind of thing. Now, you're also probably wondering, why did I want to study specifically the effects of these digital engagement types on mental well-being whilst eating? And that's an interesting question. And that's because historically, eating is a very kind of firstly, we all eat in some fashion, we all consume some kind of nutrients. I'm not here to generalize, but we all do consume some kind of nutrients. So it's a very important part of everybody's everyday life. And I thought that if we could explore the effects that digital engagement during something as common as eating and what that had the effects on mental well-being, that might help to influence how researchers, especially say therapists, might help their clients in the future. Partly because it is believed that people can form a parasocial relationships with people online or characters in a TV show. That basically means false sense of social connection. So you feel connected to somebody, but they don't know you, is basically what parasocialism is. And the idea of doing that was, yeah, that's great and all, but there's very limited research as to what doing these activities whilst eating, which is a very, again, as I discussed earlier, common thing that people do, would be. So that's the idea of my study. So we had three hypotheses. We had three hypotheses. We had whether or not it would increase or decrease the levels of loneliness, decrease the levels of social disconnection, and whether it would increase or decrease levels of well-being specifically. So you're probably wondering, how did we measure that? So first it was a correlational design. So we were looking for relationships between variables. We used an online study created through the online platform SciToolkit in order to spread the study to as many people as possible. And we used 3 dependent variables. So we used loneliness, mental well-being, and social connection, or in this case, disconnection, but you'll see why in a minute. So to be specific though, when it came to who and where we recruited via social media, specifically Instagram and Facebook, and then also the School of Psychology's student participation panel through Bangor University. Now, our survey consisted of the usual age and gender demographics and that sort of thing, just to get a basic sample of who we were looking at. And then we had our own made self-developed digital engagement scale. So we had 5. There were more, but we only analysed 5 digital engagement types in the study. So we had, again, once we'd had the results, we analysed only 5 and we put that into the results section. So we had watching TV and movies, scrolling through social media, talking on the phone, talking on video chat, and playing video games. Those were the 5 that we specific digital engagement that we looked at. But we also, in the actual survey, threw in both more possibly digital and non-digital engagement types, as well as completely non-digital engagement types such as reading a book and that sort of thing. So I know this can sound a bit confusing, so right here I've got an example of what the questions looked like. So we had firstly we had our digital engagement scale, and then we had the UCLA loneliness scale, and then after that we had the WBS scale, and then we had the social connectedness scale revised, specifically the 3rd version. Now, I just want to point out though that none of these scales were standardized or verified. We changed them slightly just to make it easier for people to understand, but the core idea of each one of them was the same. So here you can see an example of what the questions would have looked like. So you've got a question asking somebody about their content habits. So this one specifically is talk to other people in the room, but that obviously isn't an example of a digital engagement, but it was kind of a control-ish, I would say. So you had the none of the time, rarely, some of the time, often, all of the time, and then prefer not to answer. So people would just have to specify which one they fit best into. And then here are the results. So the main result of our study was that there was no relationship found, at least a significant relationship found, between digital engagement during eating and loneliness, mental well-being, and social connection. But there were additional findings. So basically, higher loneliness levels were associated with lower well-being and greater social disconnection, as research has shown before. Here, I have made it easier for you to understand by seeing the exact numbers of the analysis that we ran. So on the left-hand side, you can see the variables. We have digital engagement, we have social disconnection, we have loneliness, and we have mental well-being. And then across, we have the significance level. As you can see, none of the numbers here are significant. So now you're probably asking yourself, what does that mean? So again, nothing we were looking for was significant. So that means that digital engagement may have, and I'm not saying it did, but it may have become a kind of a neutral behavior, meaning that's just something we do in the background. Maybe people have the TV on in the background and they're not paying attention while they're eating, that kind of thing, right? But we did measure different types of digital engagement, and that could have different effects, which means, again, it's hard to know what the effects would be without doing further research, but we can discuss that in a later slide. So these findings, again, show that there's a strong support for the importance of real-world social connection, because we didn't specifically analyze these, but it is shown through prior research that in-person connection is incredibly important. So the findings that we found in this study specifically contrast with both the social surrogacy theory, which is the idea that people get social connection from digital engagement and TV shows, is the idea. Again, we didn't find that specifically whilst eating. That might be true in other areas, but specifically in our study it wasn't. Also, there's another theory by Knowles that people, if they're lonely, if they're sad, will seek out things to increase their levels of connection and that kind of thing. Again, we didn't find this in our study. So our study contrasts with research done before. You're probably asking yourselves, well, what are some of the strengths of our study and what are some of the limitations? And I'm glad that you asked. So some of our strengths, again, of our study are that we explored under-researched everyday behaviour. Again, it was eating. So we all eat to some degree in the day. As far as we're aware, nobody's ever researched the impact that watching digital TV or anything like that has on mental well-being while you eat. So that's an interesting point. We also have some limitations, as you can see, and I'm going to go through just a few of them really quickly for you. We had the different digital behaviors in my study specifically. I'd grouped together, and I'm wondering whether they cancel each other out. So that would be something, again, interesting to look at. And we could examine different digital activities separately, if that's something you're into. Again, please take this research and do your own stuff with it. We could explore the motivations for digital engagement. So we've got why exactly do people digitally engage? Is it to make themselves happy? Is it to distract themselves? Like, why exactly do we do it? And then I also think it might be interesting to include future research wise qualitative research methods. So that qualitative research methods, that basically means questions to the participants. Why exactly do they do what they do? Basically like an interview idea. So that is the discussion, I believe. Let me just double check that for some reason. Hang on. And then we've got the conclusion. So again, digital engagement during eating wasn't significant with loneliness, well-being, or social connection, which is fine. It's important to look at the real world kind of connections that people have with each other and do some further research into why our research findings were not significant. I want to thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope that you found this interesting. And if you would like to, there are some references here for you to look at really quickly. I can just pause those if that's something you'd be interested in. And I want to thank you for listening.